Hello and welcome to the show. This is not a quick tip, but it is going to be on some tips and I'm going to mimic it over here. So let's roll title. Now that we got that done, what I'm going to do over here is mimic some of the things here to give you a couple of tips that might help dealing with putting tile, both in gluing them down, the setting of them, and the grouting of the set tiles on the wall. The first piece of advice I would say, first tip, is work small. This is not a race. A contractor puts in thousands of these things a year or over 10-year period. They're going to be a lot quicker. It's not a race. So work small. When you do your gluing, you're setting them, work small. Take your time, set each one of them perfectly. Get them as close to that as you can. When it comes to doing the grout, work small again. What it says on the container about working 5 or 10 square feet or whatever, that's an awful big area. Work a small area, and when you start to see it hazing over, it's probably time to take that sponge and make your first pass as it goes. Be careful again with your sponge. Even though you can squeeze it as hard as you can, it'll still want to run the little drips down there. You'll have to clean them off later. So just work small. Work at your speed. Don't worry about trying to get her done super fast. It's going to be there for a lifetime or until you rip it back off. It's just work small. Now, we'll start with a quick refresher in case you didn't watch that other video. Here are two trowels. You see this one has great big old teeth, right? Let me get it against the backdrop. There we go. Great big. This is for grout. This is for floors. Generally used for floors. Now this one is much lighter in the size of the lines it's going to draw. This is for glue, and an 1/8 inch versus a 1/4 inch. This, of course, get my sponge out of the way, is Mapei's Type 1. It cleans up well with water. It's easy to do. If you get your thing dirty, you just need to take your metal putty knife, scrape off what you can, soak it a little bit, come back, scrape that off after it's been soaked. It cleans up pretty well. It scrapes off of cabinetry pretty well. What I do is I will tape out where my line is. After I use my laser level to find where the edge of my bullnose is going to go, I'll come lay a piece of blue tape here and here. If you watch the Don't Do This at Home video where I did these two sides, you can see that in place. In that case, I was doing it because I was also going to have to prep the side of the box. But here we have the trowel. And normally I will do the same thing with it I would do with the other. I will take a little bit out of the container with this. I'm not going to dip my dirty trowel that has maybe some drying, semi-drying, clumpy pieces into the bucket. I want to keep this virgin and clean it all the time. So I'll take my trowel, dip some out, and butter the edge. And after you do a swipe, you'll find it'll get a big bulge right here. I'll come in, catch it, flip it, catch it, flip it. This helps keep my glue on the outside. That way I can come across, if I'm doing a row, and get my horizontal lines. There's a reason for doing horizontal lines too on a layout. If you're trying to like do this, center this thing, and I'll put a video tail in to see if I did a good job centering the hood on the wall and the tile against the wall as well, to see if any of this stuff actually works in real life. But that's what we do. We'll pull it across. Now, you can find some that will have little shark teeth or little triangles. I guess they work. There's a time when we have to use them down here, but most likely we'll take, and I'll let this, because this shows up good on camera, represent a piece of tile. With a gloved hand, take your glue and what we call back butter it, clean up with a straight edge, all the edges of it, to put it on. Now, if we have this back buttered, there's a technique I like to do, assuming when I put a bullnose on, it's the end of the line. It's the terminus, that we're stopping here. We're not coming across this line. So I like to get the bullnose, if I'm going to use it, in first so it can dry and get stable. Because if it's still a little bit fresh, it'll wiggle if I try to come against it too soon. Because I'm going to use, of course, spacers to do it. So let's assume we have the bullnose in place and this row in place. Now this can be a little soft, but it's backed up by everything below it and it's squished up with our spacers. I'll have the dry tile against a wet wall, and I'll put it right up as tight as I can to that bottom tile. So I'm just scraping in there, and then right up as tight as I can be against that bullnose, and then push up just a little bit. Then use my spacers to get the right distance here, and of course it would be over here. We'd line it up. So we'd use 2 on the bottom, 1 on the side. And what that does is if you'll start tight and push away, it keeps from dragging that type 1 glue out, bubbling it out toward the grout line. Because if you do that, it's okay, it's not the end of the world, but you'll have to come back with, say, a hawkbill or a metal scraper and come in here and dig that stuff out after it dries. Hey, appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, if you will, subscribe to the channel, either the YouTube or the Rumble channel, which this appears in. And if you can, check the notification bell or settings to make sure that you get notified when new videos are posted. Appreciate it. Doing grout. I talked about I like to use this. This is the first time I've used it, but I used it for a purpose. I'm older and I'm slower, and I can't get this like I used to. So rather than having a mix bucket that I have to constantly mix up a new batch, get it right, clean it out, fight it getting hard, I use this pre-mix. It's already color coordinated. I pull my tag off and I put it over in with my dishwasher and my other equipment, so I know what color and specific sequence I used in this job. But I kept that, and I can go in here, flip the top open, do the same thing when I'm doing my grout. This is a float. We talked about that. This is a squishy one. It works pretty well. I don't have my squirt bottle, but normally I'd squirt bottle it to keep this surface so it actually slides better. You can use a sponge, a damp sponge, but you don't want it to get wet. And these things are notorious for putting more water on the wall than you think's even in that sponge. It's like it's the rock in the desert that it's split, and water just coming up out of the crack. So what we'll do, same basic idea. We don't want our grout constantly falling down on our drop cloth. So I'll dig some out, and if I'm doing a big line, I'll dig it out, put it on the edge, and I want it kind of leaning a little bit forward so that when I put it in here, I'm going to come as close to an angle as I can get with a square tile. I mean, with some of these tiles that are around, it's not really easy to find an attack angle, but with subway tiles, we have some diagonals. We can bring it up here and come across and then take it and push it back up, and it works better to push up because anything that wants to fall down, you're going to catch and keep from wasting that and scrape it up, because you'll be tempted to take a scraper and try to reuse that. And you might do that on the first couple of drops, but pretty quick it starts to get hard and it makes it difficult. And you also don't want to, if you're reusing that same drop cloth, you don't want to snag up and put pieces of glue that may have fallen off that now have finally, after you've brushed it off, come loose. So it's not a good practice to do that. And that's why I like to either butter the edge. If I'm just doing 1 or 2, I can maybe come up like that and get that edge done. So don't work too big of an area. And Mapei says do circular motions, which is probably not bad, but to do that, you'll need your mister bottle to kind of mist it just a little bit. And when you do, it's going to get all over the surface of your tile. So you'll want to take this and clean anything you get off, throw it down in a spot, get it cleaned off, throw it down in a spot, and while it's drying, not 100% dry, come back in with a blue scratchy pad and clean those lines up, because they'll clean up a lot nicer and give a lot sharper line if you'll do that. Then if you need to, you can come back in with your sponge, and clean that off. And I've never seen it. It says on the bucket or somewhere, you might not need more than a second pass. Well, I think that is bovine scatology. I've never seen one where we didn't clean it 4 or 5 times trying to get across it. And that's where these other numbers of scrapers come in handy. This is a little stiffer because we're going to have to scrape any residue that we have off and get it just perfectly clean before we try to seal it. So I know it would be easier and make more sense if I demonstrated that than had it already done. But like I said, I apologize when I'm putting it on. I'm working, especially with a job like this that can be kind of messy. I just don't want to get all that junk on my stuff. If you'll forgive me, I have to move the buckets right here to show you this next bit. I'll put them back. But what we would do is, imagine we're dipping into our grout container and we're doing the same thing. We're putting a little bit of a roll here. It's a little bit smaller than a hot dog. We put it up to that bottom edge and pull it up, put it up. And each time we're forcing grout in underneath that very bottom row. Because remember, our ledger method, we do up above and we come back in and back butter, put that lower first row in, but now we have that gap that we got to fill. So again, same thing, dip it in, pull it at an angle, dip it in, pull it at an angle, because we want it to be low, and if you have to, tap it, let it fall on the countertop, and then push it in and work it in. After that, you can come back with one that's got a rounded edge or fillet, and you can draw your line, or you do a straight edge if you want, however you want to do it. But go ahead and get that bottom edge packed in there as well. Oh, another thing I didn't put in the original video that I'm chopping this into, on the corners, you'll notice that where I do the bull nose, there isn't a corner there. It's actually a mitered corner, and that's because Lowe's, where I got the specific brand of tile, they don't sell a bullnose corner. Why, I don't know. But if you haven't selected your brand of tile, look for a brand that you can actually get a corner for if you're going to actually have one. Now, part of the beauty of just going at the edge of the uppers is I avoided all but one corner. And for one corner, I can miter it. It just made it easier for me to pick the commodity up, which is really all subway tiles are. 3x6 subway tiles are commodity. You can get them anywhere. You just don't want to mix brands because the glazing can be off a little bit and they look a little different. I hope this helps. I hope this is worth watching, and thank you.